You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We've got a great show for you today. First, the Minister of Foreign Trade and Development in the Netherlands, Minister Lilianne Ploumen, is here, or rather a long-distance phone call, about this amazing new institution that she has created called She Decides. And also the woman who created and heads a new national initiative on women and Parkinson's disease with Parkinson's Foundation. So both of those are coming right up, but first, you know it, we have to go inside the headlines. A lot of headline-deserving news these days is actually inside the heads. For example, female Supreme Court justices are interrupted more by male justices and advocates. The Harvard Business Review examined transcripts of 15 years of SCOTUS oral arguments and found that as more women join the court, the reaction of male justices has been to increase interruptions of the female justices. Male justices are now interrupting female justices at double-digit rates per term, but the reverse is almost never true. In the last 12 years, during which women made up on average 24% of the bench, 32% of interruptions were of the women, but only 4% were by the women. Nor are these results limited to the current Supreme Court. And here's an additional element. In 2015, male advocates, lawyers pleading before the court, interrupted Justice Sotomayor as the most common form of interruptions of any justice, accounting for 8% of all interruptions in the court. Justice Sotomayor is the court's only woman of color. These behavior patterns are crucial because oral arguments shape the outcomes of case decisions. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, the DOL, Google has discriminated against its female employees in, quote, systemic compensation disparities across the entire workforce, indicating that discrimination against women in Google is quite extreme, even in this industry. Close quote. Google denied the accusations and claimed they didn't have a gender pay gap. But the explosive allegations emerged at a hearing in federal court as part of a lawsuit the DOL filed against Google, which is, after all, a federal contractor. That compels the company to provide salary and other data. Google's been resisting releasing additional diversity statistics, and Labor Department lawyers have asked the court to cancel all the company's federal contracts and to block any future business with the government if it continues to refuse to comply with the audit. The latest diversity statistics from 2014 showed that women comprised 31% of Google's overall workforce, and only 2% of workers were African American and 3% Latino. Facebook has unveiled new tools to root out so-called revenge porn. Now, when such content is reported to Facebook, it will be reviewed by a trained member of the Community Standards team and is likely to be removed with the account of the user who posted it disabled. Facebook's also taken steps to alert users to fake or false news. Well, we'll see. And staying with cyber stories for a moment more, according to new research from the Center for Cyber Safety and Education and the Executive Women's Forum on Information Security, Risk Management, and Privacy, women make up only 11% of the information security workforce, a number that's remained steady since 2013. The study also found that women in cybersecurity have higher levels of education than men, but hold fewer senior-level positions and earn less money. Perhaps this explains why cybersecurity these days is so and insecure. One approach to ensuring equal workplace treatment is being tried in Iceland, where last October there were major demonstrations led by the Icelandic Women's Rights Association about equal pay for women. Iceland has had equal pay laws for half a century, pushing companies and the government to gradually reduce the pay gap. But last month, The government introduced legislation requiring employees to prove they're paying women equally, in the hope of bridging the gap within 5 years. The global gender pay gap won't close for 70 years unless such efforts accelerate. That's according to the International Labor Organization. Women in Iceland still earn 14 to 20% less than men. Although about half of parliament members are women, nearly 80% of women are in the workforce, and, though only because of a gender quota, almost half of company board members are women. Yet women still wield less economic power than men. We now know more about the previously reported here legislative push to decriminalize domestic violence in Russia, where epidemic levels of domestic violence have been well documented by NGOs and the United Nations itself. The publication New Eastern Europe reports that the legislation was initiated by a woman, Yelena Mizulina, an ultra-conservative Duma, or parliament, deputy, who was chosen as point person on the bill because she had argued that, quote, non-serious domestic assault should no longer be a criminal matter, with a penalty attached, adding, quote, why should a man be sent to prison for a slap? Defined as cuts and bruises, these so-called non-serious assaults are now being treated as an administrative matter and dealt with through fines, with criminal proceedings undertaken only in cases of repeated assault or for those resulting in concussion, broken bones, hospitalization, or worse. Mizulina is one of the most notorious of Putin's so-called Iron Ladies, an activist cohort of anti-feminist religionists, and she was also behind Putin's anti-homosexual propaganda law. The move to punishment by fines makes it less likely for women to register a complaint, since the results will harm the family budget. Already, regional leaders are reporting spikes in domestic assaults since decriminalization. A famous Russian proverb goes, "He beats you because he loves you." Returning to the U.S., a heads-up alert on the latest efforts by conservative legislators to limit abortion access through so-called abortion reversal bills that would require providers to inform women undergoing medication abortions that the procedure is reversible and therefore untrustable, despite a total lack of evidence that reversal ever occurs. Laws have already passed in Arkansas and South Dakota and are being considered in Colorado, Indiana, North Carolina, and Utah that would make the propagation of such disinformation legal. Meanwhile, last Thursday, April 13th, Trump signed into law a bill to overturn a rule reinforcing protections for the more than 4 million people who rely on Title X, the nation's family planning program, for their health care. While this bill doesn't defund Planned Parenthood in the strictest sense, it will embolden states to try to block access to health care through Title X, both at Planned Parenthood health centers and at independent clinics. This follows on Trump's having reinstated and expanded the global gag rule, about which more later in this program, and his and the GOP's attempt to repeal the ACA, or Obamacare, to ram through anti-abortion and anti-birth control Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, and to end funding for the United Nations Family Planning Agency, UNFPA. All that in less than 100 days. We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and when I return, we will be talking with the Dutch Minister of Foreign Trade and Development, Minister Lilianne Ploumen, about a remarkable initiative that she's begun called She Decides. That's coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. One of the first things that any new president of the United States does is throw the football, the political football, that has to do with women's health and maternity, or desire for freedom from maternity. That is the sometimes called gag rule. Sometimes it's called the Mexico City policy because of a conference from which it originated. But it basically is the rule that allows or bars American aid funding to international organizations that discuss abortion as a family planning option with clients. Keep in mind that American law already forbids the use of taxpayer money to fund the procedure itself, which I happen to disagree with hugely. But in other words, no abortion is going to get funded abroad or in the United States by the use of taxpayer funds. Every Democratic president signs this permission into law with an executive order, and every Republican president undoes it and bars U.S. aid to international organizations that discuss pregnancy termination as a family planning option, along with maternity care, prenatal care, all the other things that those organizations would do. And of course, true to his party, Donald Trump signed immediately an executive order barring U.S. aid to any international organization that discussed abortion as part of family planning option. Well, an interesting thing happened this time around, which is that the Minister of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation for the Netherlands, Lilianne Ploumen, age 54, decided that she would establish a non-governmental organization, She Decides, to raise money for aid groups whose funding is threatened under that new order. And today she tells us all about it, what SheDecides.com is, how she got it started, the countries that are involved, and we talk with her to my great pleasure and honor on the phone from the Netherlands. Here is Minister Ploumen.
Hi, this is Lilianne Ploumen.
Hello, Minister Ploumen. Thank you so much for doing this. It's very exciting to have you on the program.
Well, and thank you for calling and for taking an interest in She Decides. I'm quite honored.
Well, first of all, I have to congratulate you and everyone in the Netherlands. I know that you're a social democrat, but all of the Netherlands turned back a right-wing populist nationalist just a few days ago. You did better than we did, and congratulations.
Well, one of the great things about this election was that there was a turnout of over 80%, which is really high. And it was really good to see. It was a great campaign, good debates. And so I think everyone was able to make a very informed decision on their vote. So,
bravo.
Yeah, I was very happy to see the turnout also.
The whole world was happy because you were the first to turn the tide. You set an example. We're working hard here to turn it around, but we were very proud of you. So thank you.
Yeah,
now, She Decides. Yes, bravo again, because, of course, you as the Minister of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation in the Netherlands have established when the United States threatened and then did under the gag rule, basically in effect withdraw all funding for reproductive rights abroad under Trump. You moved into the breach and established an NGO, She Decides, to raise money for aid groups whose funding is threatened under this new order. Tell us about that and the way you led the way on this.
Well, yeah. When we heard that President Trump had actually signed the Mexico City policy, I thought it was time for action. Of course, it was not totally unexpected because former Republican presidents did the same, but it also seems that the impact this time is even broader than it was under earlier Republican presidents. And so I thought we need to act, and we need to act immediately because programs will be stopped.
Yes.
And that will mean that women and girls will not have the benefit of information about sexuality, about family planning, and will not have access to services. And I've been a pro-choice activist for as long as I can remember. And we all know that, no one is pro-abortion, but we know that sometimes there's no other option
of course
for women and girls. And so And the sad thing about this Mexico City policy is that there will not be fewer abortions, but there will be more abortions.
Of course.
There will be more abortions in unsafe conditions, and women will die totally unnecessarily.
Yes, and also women will not have access to other medical functions.
Oh, yeah.
Because the policy says that if the same organization abroad does abortion counseling and performs terminations, then they will get no funding for any medical procedure. So it's it's disaster.
Well, including maternal care, and including information on how to protect yourself against unwanted pregnancies, and information about, you're the master of your own body, and if you say no, it's no, and if you say yes, it's you who can decide.
Yes.
So the impact is really, really huge. Now, so I thought we cannot do this by ourselves. The Netherlands is, of course, we're a strong donor, but we need more countries to come in. Also, countries whose women are affected by this policy. So it was wonderful to see how, on the one hand, many countries turned out to be supportive. Our neighboring countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, were the first to stand in, the Swedes, the Danes, but also Cabo Verde, Mongolia, Vietnam was there. And so we ended up having a conference 4 weeks after I announced She Decides, where over 50 countries were present.
Oh, my God. Bravo.
I know. Ranging from Colombia to Chad to Ethiopia to Vietnam, Cabo Verde, as I said. So it was a very strong coalition of countries. And what was also so good is that all kinds of initiatives started amongst citizens to raise funds. We had an auction of arts which I think you have a group like that in the United States, which was organized by Nasty Women, women who stand up for their rights.
Yes.
So they organized an auction, and the benefits were partly donated to She Decides. Just 10 minutes ago, I had a few young women activists coming to my office offering 1,000 euro that they also held an auction and said, this is money that She Decides needs. So it's not only about countries and governments pledging, but there was a huge response of citizens, also from your country, Robin.
How wonderful.
Every day I get either Facebook messages, Instagram messages, or postcards saying, we support the cause, and thank you for taking the initiative. And so it was really good to see that so many men and women stand up for women's rights, a cause that, we've been fighting for a very long time. But it seems that new activists are, turning... are standing up, basically, and really rally for the cause.
We're dancing as fast as we can, I can tell you that. Let's be sure and give is there a website where people who hear this can go to and donate and find out more?
Yes, they can. Yeah, there is a website. It's called shedecides.com, and so you can find all kinds of information about the initiative, but you can also donate. Also, people from your country can donate because it's an international website. And so everyone who wants to contribute, or if there's any questions or suggestions, just please let us know, because we want this to be a global movement.
I think this is so wonderful. I think that She Decides is if I were in the Trump administration, first of all, I would kill myself. But secondly, I would be so ashamed. That because this is the people rising up and saying, no, you will not take away a woman's reproductive rights and her humanity this way, and we will fill in the gap. It is just absolutely wonderful. And we've been trying very hard here to stop the Mexico City policy, which is named for that because it was originally decided in a Mexico City conference. But what it does, of course, is say that no information about abortions can be delivered by any group anywhere in the world, or else the U.S. will stop funding it. And you're quite right. Republican administrations have enforced it, and then the first thing that Obama did, the first thing that Clinton did, was always to free it up again. But we're trying to stop it now, next time around, from being a political football this way. It should not come and go that way. I
would agree. I mean, women's rights are human rights, and whatever political stance you take, that should not be under debate, because there's nothing Republican or Democratic about women's rights.
Yes.
It's my rights, and I want to stand up for them. And I also need politicians to protect those rights.
Yes.
Again, it's not about party politics or partisan politics, whatever you call it.
No, it's a human right.
Yeah, there you go.
It's just a human right. Well, as usual, the Dutch and the Nordic countries are ahead of the rest of the world. And if we can't depose the Trump regime, we'll all move to Holland, which you won't want either. But it's at least it's a civilized society. We lost this. We actually won this one. We won the election, but we lost the presidency because of our bizarre electoral system. But we are working on. There are articles in the Constitution to change this before 4 years, and we're working on every front. And of course, the Women's March, the global Women's March, made such a difference, because this time around it is in fact women in the leadership of the revolt, and more women, you will be pleased to learn this, more women are running for office now and training to run for office than ever before in the history of this country.
Well, that's really great news. And even also here in my country, we've seen that there's less women in parliament, which is the not so good news. But the good news is that there has been a campaign saying vote for a woman, trying to get as much women into parliament with personal votes. And so I also managed to secure my seat through personal votes. So that was a great campaign. And I think for all women, young and old, from all backgrounds, it's very important to make sure that your voice is heard and that you are part of a political process. So it's very encouraging to hear that in the United States you have now more women who want to run for office and prepare for a political role. That's really good.
Well, we've had, as you know, a huge women's movement for decades, but it was less connected to the electoral process than since many of us would have liked. And this time, it just got pushed over the edge with rage, and now they've put on their running shoes. So it's very good news. I am so grateful to you for everything that you do every day and for creating She Decides and SheDecides.com. I know that our listeners who are activists will sign on and contribute, and it's a wonderful idea. And you didn't pontificate, you just went ahead and did it. So thank you for that, and on behalf of women everywhere.
Well, thank you very much, Robin. It was great to be on your show.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And now I know you've been waiting to visit the Surrealism Corner. Wildlife surrealism. 2 items here. Humpback whales have been massing in groups of 20 to 200 off the coast of South Africa, which is an extremely rare event. Researchers have no answer as to why, and not knowing is kind of weirding them out. But there is good news about the manatee, or sea cow, the animal that probably inspired myths about mermaids. Well, the manatee is no longer an endangered species. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has downgraded the animals from being endangered to being threatened, thanks to an annual count that found over 6,000 of them living happily in Florida waters. But the executive director of the Save the Manatee Club sent out a statement of concern that reduced protections might follow the reclassification and would seriously undermine the chances of securing the manatee's long-term survival. Okay, Manatee Club, maybe stop refusing to take yes for an answer. By now, everybody has witnessed White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer's mortifying meltdown, one surreal version after another, as he dug himself deeper and deeper in his comparison of Syrian President Assad to Hitler, especially Spicer's comment that Hitler never, quote, gassed his own people, close quote. This from the same White House that observed Holocaust Remembrance Day with a statement making absolutely no mention of the Jews. But what went a little less noticed was Spicer's topping 4 separate qualifying statements, sort of revising process in public, followed by an apology, followed by a second apology in which he expressed his special regret that his inappropriate comments had distracted from Trump's attempts to destabilize the region. Actually, Sean, I think Trump's capacity for destabilizing any region remains a concern to all of us, wherever he goes and whatever he does. As for travel, of course, Trump doesn't need to worry about being forcibly ejected from a seat he paid for on United Airlines flights. He's got Air Force One. But we taxpayers do worry that in his first 10 weeks of office, he spent 7 weekends at his Florida club, incurring travel costs estimated at upwards of $24 million. The travel bill of the entire Obama presidency, including state and official visits abroad, was $12.1 million per year. In total, $97 million over 8 years. Then there's Alabama, which wins the Surreal State Award this week, possibly every week. In order to avoid imminent impeachment hearings, Alabama Governor Robert Bentley, he who had fought to stay in office after fallout from an affair with a top aide, finally resigned. Bentley, 74, a dermatologist and former Baptist deacon with an uncanny twin-like resemblance to The Simpsons' Mr. Burns, has been embroiled in a sex scandal since telephone conversations, tapes of them, surfaced in 2016, in which he made lewd remarks to a female aide and also some extremely bad poetry like "Bless our hearts" and other parts. His wife of 50 years, who had recorded the telephone conversations secretly, divorced him, and the Alabama Ethics Commission found probable cause that he'd broken ethics and campaign laws, and they referred the matter for prosecution. Bentley countered with a plea agreement on 2 misdemeanor charges, failing to file a major contribution report and knowingly converting campaign contributions to personal use. I don't know why those should be misdemeanors and not felonies. He still tried to stonewall to the end, astonishingly, even after reviews by the FBI and the Alabama Attorney General's office found probable cause that he had committed felonies, and a report was made public that he had, quote, fostered an atmosphere of intimidation as governor and had compelled state employees to cover up his relationship with his senior political advisor, Rebecca Caldwell Mason. Bentley is succeeded in office by Lieutenant Governor Kay Ivey, a former state treasurer, and she's the second woman to hold the office. She pledged that her administration would be open, transparent, and honest. But poor Kay Ivey, it's an uphill battle in Alabama. Bentley's resignation was the third major transfer of power in the state government in less than a year. The House Speaker, Michael Hubbard, was convicted of ethics charges and forced from office last June, and that was followed by suspension for the balance of his entire term of Chief Justice Roy Moore for violating judicial ethics standards. Wow, get it together, Alabama. Racist surrealism par excellence category. The General Social Survey, or GSS, is a wide-ranging study of cultural and political attitude that's done annually by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago. Now, because this survey is so extensive, it can go into greater depth on issues that don't feature in regular national polls, among them racial attitudes. The newly released 2016 data showed a large and still growing divide between European American or white Republicans and Democrats in their views about the intelligence and the work ethic of of African Americans. The partisan gaps among whites were as wide or wider than researchers have seen since the survey first started asking such questions in the 1990s. In general, white Republican views of African Americans have not kept pace with those of white Democrats, who were growing gradually less racist, and in some cases, white Republicans have even moved in the other direction, growing more. A majority, 55%, of white Republicans, compared to 26% of white Democrats, felt that African Americans are worse off economically because most lack the motivation or willpower to pull themselves up out of poverty. 42% of European American Republicans versus 24% of European American Democrats rated African Americans as lazier than whites. 16% of white Republicans felt it was, quote, very likely, close quote, that a white person wouldn't get a job or promotion that an equally or less qualified black person would, while 7% of white Democrats said the same. Also, 26% of white Republicans versus 12% of white Democrats said they'd be opposed to a family member or relative marrying an African American, and most horrifying, 26% of white Republicans, compared with 18% of white Democrats, rated black Americans as less intelligent. Anybody still think we're in a post-racist era in this country? Last, as expected, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell broke precedent and Senate rules in order to confirm Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court. So a ninth justice now sits there, narrowly having escaped an 11th-hour scandal about his having plagiarized large chunks of other people's work for a book of his own. I have a surreal suggestion for him, which will make his own life much easier and be very good for the country. Please, simply plagiarize any judicial opinion by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on virtually any issue, and we won't complain one bit. Time for another short pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and April, among being the month of many things, is also Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month. And so when we return, we will be talking with a woman who is spearheading a major national program to put women with Parkinson's disease on the map of research and support and attention. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Newer listeners to this program will not know that every April I devote a segment of the program to women and Parkinson's disease, not only because April is Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, but because about 6.5 years ago I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and my mother had it before me. So in one sense, it wasn't that much of a shock. It is a progressive degenerative disease. I never like the degenerative part. It always makes me sound kinky, like a degenerate. But it is a unique disease in that it's different for everybody who has it. And I can be happy to report that so far it has impacted very little on my quality of life. The meds are working, although there's no cure yet. There are some symptom relieving drugs that work superbly, and I'm very grateful for them. I began to get involved with the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, which has since merged with the Parkinson's Foundation, because of their PDF's program that listened to patients and had patient advocacy as part of its mandate, largely because of one woman there who was the vice president for national programs, Veronica Todaro. As time went on, We examined together the fact that women were left out of most of the research tests and trials because it was thought, oh, well, men are the generic, as it had been thought in heart disease. It was thought at one point women didn't have heart disease because we present differently from men. No pain radiating down the left arm, etc. And it turns out, of course, once the women's health movement forced the inclusion of women in the tests and trials, the big scandal was that, in fact, heart disease is the number one killer of women. So on an age which we're entering into of gender-specific medicine, it became all the more important to look at how PD affects women because there was just very little, if any, examination of that in terms of medications, in terms of symptom differences, in terms of how it's onset, in terms of the support and care that women have. For example, when a man gets PD, the woman tends to support him and keep the family together if they are a couple. When the woman gets it, there's a high rate in other diseases that is yet to be examined in PD, but anecdotally, the man leaves. So there's a lot of different aspects of this. Also, women are the primary caregivers for Parkinson's. And Veronica Todaro, to my great pleasure and honor, the woman who made of this question of mine, what about the women, had already been asking it in her own head and made of that the first national program, major initiative on women and PD. And here's my conversation today with Veronica Todaro. Ronnie, it's good to have you back on the program.
Robin, thank you so much for having me again.
Well, April, of course, is Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, and you and the Parkinson's Foundation are definitely aware of women, which is the first time that's happened on the Parkinson's map. So I would like you to tell the listeners, many of whom have picked up on the program since you were last on, what the basic problem was in terms of women not being visible really in research and other areas of support with the disease, and how this all got started and where we are now, because this is a major program that you've initiated.
Great. Thank you, Robin. Again, thank you for the opportunity to talk about some of our work in relation to women in Parkinson's disease. So the Parkinson's Foundation had started to look at this issue back in 2013, primarily because women and men experience Parkinson's differently in relation to their symptoms, medications, medical care, and support services. And as you recall, we pulled you in, as well as a group of other women leaders, to join us around the table in 2013 to start to examine this issue and determine what the Parkinson's Foundation can do for the community of women who live with Parkinson's. And from that meeting, we determined that what we really need to do is to start a movement. And one of the first components of that is to, as you know so well, bringing together women from around the country who are leaders in their own communities and engaging them, connecting them, educating and empowering them, so that they can go back into their communities and educate other women with Parkinson's about the unmet needs, as well as ways that they can address them. And as we had that first gathering, I believe it was a couple of years ago, with these dynamic, inspiring women. And things started to change. And you were there, and you experienced this conference or forum, and it was fantastic.
It was a magical meeting. It really, people laughed and cried and organized and got angry for all the right reasons and shared intimate stories, and you could just see the magic of women comparing notes. Oh, you too. Oh, then I'm not alone. Then I'm not crazy. I mean, it was very special.
It really was, and I think from there, these women have really made a difference in their own communities through organizing large multi-day conferences that bring women together, to working with smaller, creating smaller support groups. I think there is one group had started a book group as a way to engage. And as you know, big and small, everything makes a difference, and you start off where people are.
Right. Right.
And so from there, again, we recognized at the Parkinson's Foundation that what we really needed to do is see if we could engage in a more formal, structural way to dig in on what the research needs are for women with Parkinson's disease. And he listened to women and bring these findings together in the creation of a national research and care agenda. Something that could really, nationally, globally, and locally move things forward. And we were very fortunate in receiving a grant from PCORI. PCORI is the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and it's an independent nonprofit organization that was authorized by Congress in 2010 to fund research to help, patients, caregivers, and clinicians make better healthcare decisions. And so it's perfectly, as you can imagine, it's perfectly aligned with the DNA of the Parkinson's Foundation.
Yes.
Which is putting patients, women with Parkinson's, people with PD in the driver's seat, and looking at them as partners and ensuring that they have the information and the tools that they need to make the best decisions for themselves in terms of managing their illness.
Right. Well, yeah, and this is different. This is what made you different from everybody else, because it's involving patients and listening to patients as the experts on their own bodies, on their own disease, and then linking that together with medical experts. But this should be a national model because it involves patient consultation and leadership even.
Well, and that's exactly right, Robin, is that the hope is that this project, which is called Women and PD Teams to Advance Learning and Knowledge, or Women in PD Talk, will serve as a national model because it is bringing together all of the experts in Parkinson's, and those include women with Parkinson's disease, physicians, as well as other medical and healthcare professionals. And so the way that we're doing this is, again, Robin, what's so interesting is, we know each other from, going back to like my Planned Parenthood days. And,
yes.
This is really, a lot of this is organizing 101.
I know, but it works. It works, by God.
It does. This works. And in this instance, what we're doing is, we have a national team comprised of representatives from the National Institutes of Health and, leading medical associations, in addition to representatives from other Parkinson's organizations and also women with Parkinson's. And then locally, we're establishing 10 regional teams. And again, true to form for the Parkinson's Foundation, these regional teams are comprised of a woman with Parkinson's, a medical movement disorder specialist, which is a physician who is a specialist in the area of Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders, as well as a non-physician health professional. And these individuals, these leadership triads, are focused on making it, pulling together a forum in their local community. And over the course of the next 16 months, those forums will take place, and at the end of this, we'll be organizing a national forum, leadership forum, that will focus on the creation of a national research agenda, and as well as a roadmap. Again, Robin, as you know, it's great to get people together and have them think of big ideas, but the most important thing is to make sure that you have traction and that things are happening,
Oh, my God, yes. And especially important right now because, of course, under the Trump regime, which we talk about frequently on this program, I wish we didn't have to, but there you go. We know that funding for research in the biosciences is being cut way back. I mean, that will affect Parkinson's among every other, research aspect. And since women had not been factored into the research tests and trials for a number of reasons, including 101 sexism that sort of thinks as the male body as generic. I mean, that's the definitive body. But women are not in the male body, and we metabolize medication differently, and we show symptoms differently, and we have different levels of lack of support, so that this is all the more valuable than it was when it first was a twinkle in your eye, because of the current situation that we're in this country. And the reception by women on the ground for this must have been very exciting.
It really has been, Robin, that we found the reception from both women with Parkinson's disease as well as the medical community and the research community has been everyone has been very excited about this and wanting to get on board.
That's wonderful.
Since we went public with this project. And, again, we have women leaders both in all categories, in all stakeholder groups that have raised their hand and said, we want, please select us. We want to be engaged in this project. We think that this project is historic and will make significant difference in the lives. It will change the lives of women with Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, and of course it's in the self-interest of guys as well, because gender-specific medicine, which is the cutting edge of medicine and it's the medicine of the future, it means it's good for them as well. I mean, there are certain approaches to Parkinson's that work for men that don't work for women, but unless you then find out what works for women, women are left out in the cold. But it's also good to know what works the other way back round. So it's a win-win, it seems to me. It's very exciting, what you're doing with this. And we will expect in about 2 years to see a national set of sort of recommendations. Is that the timeline, kind of?
Yes, it is. In 2 years, we will have a national research and care, agenda, patient-centered research and care agenda. And, again, the goal is to bring everyone along while we're developing this plan so that, it starts to, find its way into research decision-making before the plan is
yes.
I mean, that's the goal, is to continue to educate, increase awareness, and change the way that we make our decisions around what we research in relation, and also make sure that, there should never be a study that is done that doesn't have a cut looking at gender.
Right, of course. Well, anything that's funded by the NIH, the National Institutes for Health, has to look at it by gender, even I think at the cellular level of research, as well as at the later clinical research. But isn't it only 22% of research that the NIH funds? Something like that. And so the rest of the funding, which comes from, I guess, drug companies and big pharma, doesn't necessarily mandate that there has to be a gender aspect in that. And that's one of the areas clearly to pressure.
Well, and then also, Robin, another component is a research around care.
Uh-huh.
And that's another piece of this, is to take a look at how care is currently being provided, what questions aren't we asking that need to be asked,
right.
And how do we incorporate these questions and findings into clinical care,
right,
as it relates to women with Parkinson's disease.
Right. Oh, there's so many aspects. It's very exciting that you're doing this. It's so wonderful. You are so wonderful. Ronnie, give the website where people can find out more.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Robin. So the website is www.pdf.org/WOMENPD. So it's www.pdf.org/WomenPD.
Okay. Thank you. Listen, thank you for this initiative. It's just brilliant. And thank you for everything that you do anyway, all the time. And for being with us today. You're just splendid. Thanks, Ronnie.
Oh. Well, Robin, thank you for having me, and again, thank you for your leadership and for working with us to create this amazing initiative that, again, will change people's lives.
We have to take one last break. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live, which will be back directly with my fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. I don't often devote the Fighting Words commentary segment to, words, despite my writer's passion for language. But today, since this episode airs and posts on Easter Sunday, Easter provided an unexpected inspiration. I overheard a remark wondering how in hell rabbits and eggs came to signify a Christian holiday about death and resurrection. Well, that sounds like a fair question. Well, how about this fact as an answer? It's not a Christian holiday, but goes way back pre-Christianity to spring fertility rites, which is where the egg comes in, and also where rabbits, notorious for fecundity, enter the picture. The name Easter itself is derivative of one of the names of the fertility goddess Oestra, from which the word estrogen also is derived, and it relates etymologically to the word east, the direction from which the sun rises, giving birth to every day. So Easter sends me off into language, how it's chronically abused these days and why that's so important. I've talked about not normalizing the Trump regime, but it's as important to not normalize or chuckle at Trump saying one day that NATO is obsolete and then announcing later that NATO is no longer obsolete. His personal decision, you understand, his whim. Or his proclaiming that polls unfavorable to him are, quote, negative and phony, while polls favorable to him are, quote, accurate. His own beleaguered press secretary laughed aloud while reporting that last one. We could spend hours just listing Trump's VAL, violence against language, but there's no need to re-experience those horrors since he gives us new ones every day. I want to make a bigger point here. Marine Le Pen, leader of France's far-right National Front and candidate for president, has spent considerable effort trying to undemonize her party, given its history as being sexist, racist, anti-Semitic, and, frankly, fascistic. She has also, as I mentioned not long ago on this program, pretended to now be a feminist and a progressive. But recently she slipped, revealing her and her party's true faces. During an interview, she referred to the most infamous roundup of Jews in France during World War II, when nearly 13,000 were arrested in Paris by the French police on July 16th and 17th, 1942, in what's become known as the Veldiv roundup. Le Pen said, quote, France was not responsible. If there was responsibility, it is with those who were in power at the time. It is not with France. France has been mistreated in people's minds for years. Period, close quote. But this not only tries to erase Émile Zola's famous 1898 J'accuse letter to the French government about anti-Semitism in the Dreyfus affair, but it also flies in the face of more than 4 decades of historical research into just how eager the collaboration was from the wartime Vichy-based French government. And it even surpasses other conservative French politicians who've been trying to shift France's national narrative about Vichy in those years. Le Pen attempted to backpedal, saying, quote, I consider that France and its republic were in London during the occupation, and that the Vichy regime wasn't France, period, close quote. This is akin to saying that Germany as a nation was not responsible for initiating World War II and the Holocaust, because after all, some Germans left the country, and it was actually only one German party, the Nazis, who were in power, although they'd been elected by the German people. Well, it's crazy, but it works. Sort of like a smog eating up the air of the brain, confusing logic just enough to unsettle some people's politics. Regularizing this smoggy weather until it becomes climate, which we're seeing more and more, has a profound effect on the politics, morals, and general sensibility of a society. George Orwell's novel 1984, with its slogans, "War is peace and freedom is slavery," may seem dramatically overstated. Yet when Sean Spicer calls concentration death camps Holocaust centers, that euphemism is one example of the effect I'm describing. When the United Airlines CEO, in his first response to forcible removal of a non-disturbing paying customer from a flight just because it wants the seat, names this assault, quote, re-accommodating the passenger, close quote, that's another example. A daily diet of what the great writer Toni Morrison in her Nobel Prize acceptance speech termed policing languages of mastery, sexist language, racist language, theistic language, close quote. This diet constitutes a deliberate poisoning of the citizenry. It leads, Morrison writes, to the use of bullets, quote, to iterate the void of speechlessness. It is common among the infantile heads of state and power merchants whose evacuated language leaves them with no access to what is left of their human instincts, for they speak only to those who obey or in order to force obedience. The systemized looting of language can be recognized by the tendency of its users to forego its nuanced, complex, midwifery properties." Close quote. Morrison terms this, aptly, tongue suicide. Socrates said it too when he said, "The misuse of language invites evil into the soul." When I say, like a mantra of communication, that words mean things, that words matter, I mean what I say. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. We'll be off next week on a spring break hiatus, but we will be back stronger than ever on April 30th. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and we're at iTunes worldwide where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my own website and blog at robinmorgan.net, and find me on Facebook and Twitter too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live, WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us on April 30th right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.